I'm Sharon Bill. Welcome to my YouTube channel. There's no doubt about it, but in times past I have been the utmost musical snob, and it's shameful for me to have to admit that, and hopefully years have taught me that preference isn't the same as pride, and just because it's not your thing doesn't mean that it's not valid. And I think you see, I'm more prone to enjoy classical music. My husband enjoys classical music, but he likes lots of other things, and he listens to rock music, he listens to pop music, he listens to all sorts. And so that's sort of opened my eyes a little bit. But nevertheless, that sort of slightly superior edge stayed in my thinking. And the first time I was brought to a halt and had to humble myself was when I was studying for my degree, because one of the big things that I've always sort of complained about was guitar tab. And I used to get quite uppish that I thought it was a supreme cheat and it's not proper notation, and it's an inferior form of music transcription and blah de blah. And then when I was studying for my degree, I had to transcribe a lute part from a Renaissance lutist. Is that the word? I think so. I first remember encompassing John Dowland, the lute player from the Renaissance period, when I was at school. And so at my degree, I was so thrilled to be giving proper attention to it, and I was really looking forward to delving into Renaissance music and this great composer of that period. And so I dug out my assignment, and I realised that lute music in the Renaissance period was written in tab. So it's entrenched in history, and it's a valid musical form in its own right. And I had to sort of humble myself and sort of shuffle up to my husband and say, so what's this tab thing then? Can you help me? And he was gracious eventually. I'm sure there was a bit of told you so about it though. And it's funny how these sort of prejudiced opinions sort of take root, isn't it? And I've always felt a little bit that way, what I've really liked and what I've really disliked. And I remember when I was about 8, my dad, in an attempt no doubt to be encouraging, he made me have keyboard lessons, like keyboard electric organ lessons, where you play chords in one hand and tune in the other hand. In fact, I write about the hierarchy of this sort of musical progression in my book Letters from the Broom Cupboard. So, I did start right on the bottom rung. And in a bid to help me, not that I wanted helping in this endeavour, my dad got this old bloke to come and give me a lesson. And I don't know whether it was a bit of sort of childish angst or whether the gentleman really was quite condescending, but I felt his manner was really, really patronising. And he gave me this lesson and he said, okay, so learn these chords. Well, I already knew them because I had some piano lessons in the past, and I don't know, I seem to just know them. And it was a chord sheet with the picture of the keyboard with blobs telling you which notes to press. So press this blob, this blob, this blob. And that's your C chord. No understanding of why it was, but just basically put your fingers there, that's a C chord. And so I did it, and I must have done it with not so much grace. And he seemed to think, right, okay then. So he threw me this big folder full of chord sheets, pictures, images, and he said, right, well, learn those then. And off he went. So I did, and I just really learned. It must have suited me in a sense, because I'm obviously a visual learner, and so I learned all those chord shapes within no time. And he was quite surprised when he came back, and I was like, yeah, I've done them, yeah. And he tested me, and I knew all of the chord shapes, even though I didn't understand why. And it's only now, decades later, that I can sort of humbly admit that was beneficial, although I hated it at the time. I think another thing that really wound me up was this guy. He was an old man who used to play the organ at my great aunt and uncle's ballroom dancing. Well, that just set me on edge for a start. I just couldn't bear the thought of this. But now I realise that now I understand the harmonic structure of arpeggios and harmonies and chord progressions. I know all of those chord shapes inside out. So I've got this burned into my mind now, what these arpeggio shapes look for. And so even when I'm playing them on a flute, I just see those pictures in my head. So it wasn't wasted, but I certainly didn't enjoy it at the time. And I think that's another part of perhaps why I seriously disliked guitar chord charts and that style of guitar playing where you're strumming chords. I can't do it myself, so who am I to criticise? But I just found that form of music quite shallow, just strumming chords. And the one thing I really did take issue, and I perhaps still do to a point, is the capo. I think it's a fiendish device that allows you to cheat far too much. And it's like the guitarist playing everything in C or whatever key it is, and then just moving up and down. And this kind of does the transposition job for you. So I felt like that was far too cheating a device. But then just because somebody wants to play at a certain standard, not everybody wants to give hours and hours of their leisure time to playing Rodrigo guitar concertos or whatever it is. You know, there are many levels of playing, and surely playing music at all should be applauded. And if you get an enjoyment you're playing live music, surely that's enough. And I think there is that. We're almost taught it in the arts to have this attitude of looking over your shoulder, well, I'm better than you, and then looking ahead and think, oh my goodness, you're better than me, and sort of hating them a bit for it. Surely, if we're looking over a shoulder, we should be sort of, yeah, good, well done, come along. And if we're looking ahead, we should be inspired to extend our skill set. So it's taken me a while, obviously, to process these thoughts. And just because something is different doesn't mean it's less or worse. And then I was really taught the error of my ways when my husband was given some guitarist magazines from America. And I think the culture of rock music, pop music in America is very much more academic than it is in England, or was at that point anyway. And a guitarist had written a column and was talking about this particular lead guitar section and solo. And they'd actually transcribed the notation to this guitar solo and then went into great analysis explaining how it went from this scale to this mode and this scale to this mode. And I thought, well, that just shows you, because, you know, I always say that scales are really important. We're always told that. And so as a classical musician, you do your major scales, you do your minor scales, you do your arpeggios, you do your finger exercises and so on. But although I've learned about modes in an academic sense, I would never ever think of playing them. I would never work across my modal scales, is that a term? My modes on different keys. And the knowledge is just astounding, and it sort of taught me the error of my ways. And then years later I had a jazz flute book, and that also had modal patterns to be played on the flute as well. It was just like, whoa, this is just so beyond me. And it really taught me not to be such a snob, really. And as well, I think looking at, you know, film scores, that's a nice bridge between the two, isn't it? And they're an art form all on their own, aren't they? And just music's music, surely. Everything's got its structure, whether it's sonata form or verse chorus, middle eight, verse chorus, you know, there's always a structure. And I think perhaps, you know, yes, orchestral music has more depth than perhaps a quick guitar, but it's a different genre. So I just thought it was funny how my road to humility was perhaps too long than it should have been, but at least I've got there, and thankfully I can appreciate music in all its forms. Even if it's not my cup of tea, that doesn't take away, it doesn't detract the value of that music. And I just think it's an interesting point to bear in mind. Thanks for watching. Bye.